Good morning and welcome to our stakeholder event for the publication of our Annual Review 2024. I'm Huma Yusuf and I'm Director of Business Integrity and Corporate Governance here at British International Investment. I'm delighted to once again be hosting this event. Our goal today is to provide you with an overview of the work we've been doing over the last year, as well as offer you the chance to ask our CEO and Chair some questions. This annual review aims to highlight how BII in 2024 has been bold about impact. At a time when the world is grappling with many challenges, from growing geopolitical tension to increasing macroeconomic pressures, we need to be ambitious about the impact we can have. These challenges are felt acutely in the markets where BII invests, and so we need to find innovative ways to deploy finance to drive development impact. In 2024, BII committed £1.7 billion in investments which will make a meaningful difference to people's lives and to the planet. But our distinctive approach is not just about getting capital out the door. It's about fresh thinking, tenacity, and collaboration. Throughout today's event, you'll hear about how partnerships are enabling us to deliver the development impact that is at the heart of our investment mandate. So let's take a look at today's agenda. First up, we have our chair, Diana Layfield, who will provide her perspective on 2024, the progress made, and our ambitions for the future. Diana will then hand over to our CEO, Leslie Maasdorp. Leslie joined us as CEO in autumn last year, and I'm particularly looking forward to hearing his thoughts in his first annual review event with BII. Leslie was meant to be with us in our London office today, but due to unfortunate travel disruptions, he will be dialing in today. After Leslie's remarks, we have two panel discussions. Our first panel, Bold About the Planet, Mobilizing Capital for Climate Investment, will be moderated by my colleague, Amal Amin, Managing Director and Head of Climate, Diversity and Advisory at BII. She'll be joined by three of our partners. Etana Energy, who we're partnering with to unlock investment into renewable energy in South Africa, Energrid, an Indian power transmission platform developing standalone battery storage projects, and Susi Partners, who are accelerating the clean energy transition in Southeast Asia. Together, they will explore how we can scale solutions that support the energy transition. Following that, I'll return to moderate our second panel, Bold About People, Investing in Frontier Markets. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, which will bring together inspiring entrepreneurs and partners from EcoBank Sierra Leone, from Mopo, a company that delivers clean, affordable energy to off-grid communities in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and from Lovegrass Ethiopia, an agribusiness creating jobs for farmers across Ethiopia. They'll share their experiences of building businesses in some of the world's most challenging environments and consider how development finance is helping to unlock opportunity, create jobs, and improve lives. After the panels, Leslie and Diana will return for the audience question and answer. This will be your chance to ask any questions you may have. So please start thinking about what you'd like to ask them and put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We're expecting well over 500 participants today, so we'll do our very best to get through as many of your questions as possible. Now let's get started. To kick us off, I'm delighted to introduce our chair, Diana Layfield.
Thank you, Huma, for that introduction, and a very warm welcome to everyone here with us in London, and to all of you joining online for the annual review event. To reiterate what Huma has said, please do send us your questions. We're looking forward to answering them later on this morning. I'd like to begin by reflecting on the theme of this year's annual review, Bold About Impact. What do we mean by this? Our investments support emerging economies with real development needs to grow, create jobs, and develop sustainable infrastructure to mitigate climate change and its impact. That has always been important. But this year, with a worsening macroeconomy and an increasingly unpredictable geopolitical environment, we believe it's more important than ever. These global challenges will mean greater need, but ever more constrained resources. In the face of these challenges, it's essential that we continue to make our capital work ever harder, delivering even greater impact. Over the past year, I'm delighted to share that we've done that in several different ways. We've ventured into regions often overlooked by others. We've supported entrepreneurs with new ideas and solutions to global challenges. We've innovated to find ways to unlock and mobilize additional private capital so it can reach the countries that really need it. And we've focused on ways that we can not only make individual investments, but how we can create and build markets. These markets can then continue to drive ongoing structural development in our investee countries. We believe our approach delivers multiple benefits. First, our investments make a direct difference to people and communities, delivering tangible development impact. Whether that's ensuring our finance reaches people on low incomes, or investing so they can access goods and services like basic electricity and financial services, so they can improve their livelihoods through employment and provide for their families, so they can sell their products at a fair price. Second, our investments provide the things that developing countries need: sustained, job-creating growth, so they can escape aid dependency for good. We're building modern partnerships that foster prosperity and independence, partnerships that create a more stable and secure world. Third, what we do is not only in the interest of those countries where we invest, it's also in the interest of the UK. Creating a more stable world where fragile nations can prosper and where people can find opportunities locally. We also deliver financial value for the UK taxpayer by making a return which not only delivers real investment impact, but is reinvested into more businesses. And in the current constrained financial environment, our ability to put capital to work repeatedly to secure development impact while also delivering a financial return for the UK taxpayer is particularly valuable. It is remarkably a model which creates a win-win-win for our investees, for the countries and people in which we invest, and for the UK and UK taxpayers. Let me talk about 2024 in the context of the targets which we shared with you this time last year. 2024 marked the third year of our 5-year strategy to deliver productive, sustainable and inclusive development. We've made significant strides in meeting these ambitions. Our focus on impact and delivery enabled us to commit over £1.7 billion in investments, which will make a meaningful difference to people's lives and on the planet. In addition to this 33% year-on-year increase in commitments, our impact metrics have critically also been getting even stronger, and Leslie will share more detail on these. But we've extended our reach into lower income markets. We exceeded our target for investing in women and increased our focus on female representation and development across our entire portfolio. And we've grown the depth and breadth of our capability in tackling the climate challenges which are impacting our markets. I'm particularly proud of our achievements in climate finance, an area of UK leadership on the international stage. It's also one which has a disproportionate effect on the most vulnerable markets and is central to the future of development. I had the opportunity this year to visit Scartech, one of our portfolio companies, which is supporting the clean energy transition. I saw how our investment in the Kenhardt Solar Project, one of the world's largest hybrid solar and battery storage facilities, is bringing reliable and clean power to the southern African region. The region still relies heavily on coal for electricity and suffers from an unreliable power supply. So building a cleaner, more reliable energy system is critical to supporting the region's energy transition. We supported the financing for the project's construction in 2023, and it's now fully operational, delivering 540 megawatts of solar energy and 225 megawatts of battery storage. Another key milestone in 2024 was appointing a successor to Nick O'Donoghue, who stepped down as Chief Executive in November 2024. Thank you, Nick, for your exceptional service and delivering 7 years of increased impact for BII. I was delighted this year to welcome our new Chief Executive, Leslie Maasdorp, who you will hear from shortly. He will lead BII into our next strategy period, supported by the board and the BII team. Leslie's background positions him exceptionally well to lead BII. It spans development finance, banking and government, including his experience of the transition to democratic government in South Africa. For me and for the board, his lived experience of many of our markets, his values, his personal passion for development, and his warmth and his humanity will be immensely valuable as we continue to respond to the environmental, economic, and social needs of our markets. I'd like to end with thanks. First to you, our audience, for your continued support, interest, and, as I always say, your challenge. Scrutinising our performance is a crucial part of the accountability mechanism, but most importantly, it helps guide us to better solutions. We take our duty as part of the UK's development strategy very seriously, and that comes with the responsibility to ensure that we're accountable to all our stakeholders. Over the past year, we've delivered on our commitment to be more transparent, achieving the goals set out in our 2024 Transparency Roadmap. I'm really delighted to see that these efforts have been recognised recently, with BII named as the most transparent bilateral DFI in Publish What You Fund's Transparency Index. Now, we know there is always more to do, and we will continue to focus on this. But achievements like this underline the progress that we're making. I'd also like to take the time to thank our civil service partners at FCDO for everything that you do in supporting our mandate. Our partnership with them and engagement with the team has been ever stronger this year. And finally, I want to thank every member of staff at BII for their continuing dedication and hard work. This is an extraordinary team of people whose passion for development and commitment continues to shine through in our investment. Before I pass over to Leslie, we now have a short film which provides an overview of the last year.
Thank you, Diana, for your welcome and for your kind words. I'm delighted to be here to introduce BII's annual review for the first time. I've always admired the work of BII from a distance during my career in finance, so to be asked to lead this institution is a huge privilege and honor. This is even more case today during this critical period when development finance has to play an even more critical role as the world faces a number of key challenges. Diana has already touched on a number of these challenges that we face. Emerging markets and developing economies face chronic lack of private investment. Countries need as much as $2.5 trillion per year of climate finance by 2030. And the annual investment gap to meet the sustainable development goals in developing countries is now estimated to be around $4 trillion. At the same time, we need to be realistic about the current development landscape. Many industrialized countries, in the UK, for example, have moved official development assistance from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5% and currently at 0.3%. That necessitates that we do more with less. Against this backdrop, development finance institutions have a vital role to play. Now more than ever, we need to be bold about the impact we can have, ensuring that we can bring others along with us. We need to find new ways to deploy finance to drive development impact. We need, of course, to mobilize private sector capital, which, as part of our theory of changes, BII is the engine of development, the engine of prosperity and transformation. A bit on some of the headline achievements for 2024. We've committed to leading the way at BII, and our investment activity is a reflection of this. Dan has spoken about some of the achievements from last year. The headline one I want to touch on first is that we've committed £1.7 billion sterling, seeking to make positive difference on people's lives and on the planet. These investments aim to improve economic opportunities for people, and we do that through helping create more and better jobs, which provide greater security for individuals and families. In 2024, our portfolio supported over 1 million jobs directly, and we supported jobs and livelihoods by improving access to electricity and finance and supporting local wages and supply chains. We invest in women and underrepresented and underserved groups. We back businesses that channel funding to female entrepreneurs or partner companies that improve opportunities for women in their workforce. We've committed 500 million of gender finance, which equals to 29% of our total commitments. Through a thriving private sector, we're able to generate tax receipts, which governments then use to build infrastructure, to build necessary healthcare, education, clinics, hospitals, and so on, to provide the necessary public services. In 2024, our investees paid $2.5 billion in taxes. It's also critically important that we generate a return on our investments. In that respect, 2024 was a very positive year. Our average annual portfolio returns remains above 5%, delivering a financial return for the UK taxpayer. Now, these examples that I would like to touch on now really brings to life what BII does. Seeing numbers is one thing, but it's important to highlight that this is manifested in real innovative companies that make a difference in people's lives in different parts of Africa and Asia. Since joining BII, I've been energized by the opportunity to see firsthand the difference that many of these companies make. The difference they make in terms of growing these economies, in creating jobs, in raising living standards. I've visited many companies, most recently visited Diversity, for example, an affordable housing platform focused on regeneration of South African cities. I've also visited electric vehicle businesses in India, in Mumbai, in Bangalore. And through all of these, I can see and touch the real impact that our companies are having. In Kenya, for example, I visited Mkopa, which is a leading digital finance platform which combines technology with flexible finance to transform people's lives. In 2024 alone, it reached over 5 million underserved customers across Africa. This is the direct impact that BII has. So we are committed through these examples to unearth innovative entrepreneurs, support them, back their companies, and grow these companies to make a long-term difference. Today is therefore a chance for us to look back, look at what BAI has achieved, look at the companies that we have partnered with, but also to reflect on or to look at what does this mean for the future and to look ahead. So these challenging global times, as Diana has highlighted, require a reset of the development finance model, but it's about enhancing and growing and becoming more efficient and effective at what we do. There's some themes that I'd like now to highlight. The first one is climate finance. The world has a great set of short-term political uncertainties, but these uncertainties pale into insignificance compared to the long-term cast iron certainty of the acute need to tackle the climate emergency. That is why the UK is providing global leadership on climate finance. Just last week, during London Climate Action Week, it was very clear to see all of the different offerings of the UK government coming together and the strong leadership role that the UK is playing in this space. As the UK's principal vehicle for delivering climate finance into emerging markets, BII therefore has this critical role to give effect to this commitment. Over the last few years, including in 2024, we've stepped up our climate finance leadership to respond to this challenge. For example, we've committed £708 million to climate projects, 41% of our total commitments. This is against our target of 30%. This includes investments that are addressing the clean energy transition, especially in markets where decarbonization is critical. Later on, we're going to hear, for example, from Energrid in India for a little bit more detail. This is a platform which we help to set up to develop power transmission and standalone battery storage projects to help accelerate the country's progress towards net zero. Of course, the global transition to net zero requires the adoption of green solutions across all sectors, not just the energy sector. And one area of focus, which I touched on earlier, is our efforts, for example, in e-mobility. In India, we've made several investments across the electric vehicle sector during last year, and I was pleased to meet several of these companies in Bangalore. India urgently needs more electric vehicles to decarbonize its transport sector, which is a significant contributor to the challenge of air pollution in many of the large cities. So our investments will help pioneering companies that are contributing to India's energy transition and to the decarbonization journey. While our investment figures in climate projects serve as markers of success, we aspire to go even further. Backed by the UK's leadership on climate, there's potential for us to play an even greater role. The second theme I'd like to touch on is unlocking private investment. My reflection is that development finance institutions will be submerged by the climate and development challenges if we are not able to galvanize significantly more private sector and commercial capital at scale. And unlocking investment opportunities for private capital and making public finance go further was already a priority for us last year, but we will continue to make this a priority and deepen this focus in future years. The effectiveness of a DFI should really not be judged by their own investments, because that is only one component, but by the role they play in mobilizing commercial investors. I was very pleased to see that we've mobilized over $1.5 billion of private sector capital into our investments last year. I was also delighted to see that we launched a new mobilization facility towards the end of last year, which is specifically aimed at unlocking hundreds of millions of pounds of private investment into emerging economies. Since then, as part of the facility, we've been working with investors, including from the City of London, in a call for proposals to develop solutions to boost this investment, working with private sector institutional investors, especially from the city. The third theme I'd like to touch on is investing in frontier markets. BAI has invested in frontier markets over a very long period of time. This has been a priority because these countries typically fall outside of the investment horizon and geographic focus of commercial investors. we've committed 880 million pounds sterling to the poorest and most fragile markets, and you will see examples of these investments in our report. The focus on frontier markets will continue to be a priority in the next coming years. Most recently, for example, last month, I attended the DFI Frontier Markets Forum, which is an annual event that we host, bringing together all the different stakeholders to discuss the challenges of investing in these very complex markets and to find solutions through greater and more enhanced collaboration between DFIs and smart partnership amongst our peers. One important outcome of the forum has been the Africa Resilience Investment Accelerator, or ARIA as it is known as, which was launched a few years back. And it is really based on these collaborative engagements with our DFI peers. Through this accelerator, we've continued to work with development partners to de-risk private sector investments in frontier markets. We were specifically pleased most recently to have our counterparts, specifically the French DFI Proparco, join BII together with FMO, which is the Dutch DFI, as a funding partner of ARIA. We also were delighted to see the first investment to be made under ARIA, which is a new facility with EcoBank in Sierra Leone, which will provide much needed capital for ambitious local entrepreneurs and businesses. You'll hear more about this business later this morning. The final theme I want to touch on is collaboration and partnership for systemic change. I already touched on the fact that there's a changing development landscape. This changing development landscape calls for more increased partnerships, more smarter collaboration with our peers. And the scale of the challenges we face requires collective action. There are a number of examples where this is already happening in practice. Garanco, for example, is a recent partnership where we're able to provide guaranteed funding to Etana Energy in South Africa to unlock investment into renewable energy projects. Another example, which I touched on earlier, is our mobilization facility. And the final one, which I just referenced now, is ARIA, which shows that BII is already on different streams working together to confront the challenges of investing in frontier markets in a more collective fashion. These initiatives combined will contribute over time to systemic change and a retooling of the business models of the development finance industry. So as we look to the future, we will focus on the strategic collaboration with partners and look to deepen it through all of our investments. In closing, I feel positive about the impact we have achieved in 2024, and I hope that as you read our annual review, that it illustrates that and that you enjoy reading it. I also want to echo what Diana's done already to thank the dedicated team of professionals and creative thinkers at BII. Since joining BII, I've been struck by the passion of the teams. They're deeply committed to our mission of supporting sustainable development. Their dedication and hard work is really at the heart and center, the driving force of our success. And I want to thank all of our partners and our investee companies. It's to you, your direct and hard work, that we are able to deliver the impact and prosperity in a very difficult economic and political environment.
We've now reached the time for the Q&A with our CEO and Chair. Thank you to everyone online who has been submitting questions. We have had a lot come through, so I might merge some questions into broader themes. And where I can, if you've provided your name and organization, I'll attribute the question. Diana and Leslie's presentations have prompted some excellent questions, and as usual, they reflect the diversity and depth of our work. So let's get started. A big welcome back to Diana and Leslie. So the first question that we can jump to is about impact, the heart of what we do. So how does BII ensure that its investments create meaningful, measurable impact, and what challenges arise in tracking long-term success Leslie, this is perhaps a question for you from Alvin Paul at Sky.
Thank you very much. This question really goes to the heart of our business model and what we do as a firm. And the first point I'd make is that, our approach to impact is really guided by the operating principles for impact measurement management. And there's, consensus within the development finance community that these represent really the sort of core industry standards for good impact management. And what we do as a matter of course at BII is that we make sure that we get independently assessed, so that it's not just ourselves ticking boxes to show that we are doing well, but in 2024, for example, we were independently assessed as being advanced for all of the 8 different of the impact principles. The second point I'd like to make is that throughout the investment cycle, impact is embedded right from the outset. From when an investment proposal is considered, we looked at the impact, we assess who benefits, we, in a detailed way, look at how will the impact be achieved. We analyze what is BII's contribution, and we also, of course, look at the risks. And then finally, right at the point of exit, we then analyze what has been the progress over time. So it's really throughout the investment cycle that BII looks at impact. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question for you from Mohammed Iqbal from United Finance, which focuses a bit more on how we're thinking about long-term measurable impact, but specifically in fragile markets where the risk and the need are higher. And as we've just heard in our panel from our speakers, that also data is harder to come by.
As we know, and as we said earlier in our remarks, fragile markets have, a very underdeveloped context, and often, or as a starting point, we recognize we cannot do it alone. We have taken an approach to lead by example. So, for example, as I've referenced earlier, we formed ARIA. So we work to improve coordination amongst our peers, and the aim is to sort of develop investment opportunities together in these markets, and to learn from each experience. So one of the things that we do is to identify specific local specialist intermediaries or specific platforms that exist in these markets that we can then work with. And I'll make one concrete example. Because of our assessment of a number of these markets, we've created a company in the energy space on transmission and distribution. This company is called Gridworks, which plays a very vital role in several of these markets, like Mozambique, for example, Burundi, Uganda, where we use this vehicle, which we own as BII, as the vehicle through which we can have impact.
Thanks, Leslie. I might change track a little bit, as we've had several questions coming in on how the UK aid spending cuts might affect BII's ability to continue delivering the kind of strategies that we have been doing so far. Diana, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I suppose the first thing I'd say is that I think it's an enormously challenging position for the UK, and I think none of us envy the decisions the government's had to make on allocating capital. And I think we all recognise that there are huge constraints on the budget. Whilst that isn't necessarily where we'd all like to be, I think what that does is it gives us a real challenge to make sure that we are being as effective as we can. So I think the first impact on us is, like everybody else, we haven't seen the formal output of the spending review, but we're expecting to get significantly less capital. And like everyone else, that means we need to do more with less. I think very specifically for BII, the model that we have of investing and repeatedly investing for return does at least mean that we will be able to continue to invest as we are now in companies. Obviously, the precise level of that will be affected by our strategies and where we invest, but we hope to be able to continue to invest at broadly similar levels.
And I suppose then a follow-up, which is quite related, which is whether BII is impacted by the sort of rollback of USAID, and whether US policy changes recently have affected our investment strategies.
So I think the first thing is to acknowledge that the world, as I've said, is in a challenging place. And a drop in development funding anywhere, and particularly everywhere, affects all of us and affects all of the investee companies. But we're living in a world where actually there is a much greater need for development finance and development investment rather than a lesser need. So I think it's incumbent on us to focus on 4 things here. The first is efficiency. Are we making that annual improvement that we want to make on how efficiently we invest, how disciplined we are with our costs? The second is our effectiveness. Do we really understand development impact? Are we continuing to refine that? Is impact always our North Star? The third is prioritization. Having understood that, are we really focused on the areas of greatest development impact? And finally, I think there's a theme of collaboration here. The great thing about the development space is organizations around the world have always collaborated, and we've always collaborated here in the UK as well. But making sure that we are globally collaborating and focusing on that impact, I think, is key.
So following up on the ambition to be more effective and impactful at a time when development finance is needed, we have a question for you, Leslie, I think, which is on whether BII is planning to participate in Mission 300, which is focused on energy access across Africa. And this question comes from Marieke Fourie from Inspired Evolution.
Thanks. Yes, indeed. Mission 300, just to sort of summarize, is an endeavor, a very ambitious campaign, which has coalesced what is quite an unprecedented alliance, really bringing together DFIs, bringing together multilateral development banks, bringing together the philanthropic sector, and indeed governments. So the first point about Mission 300, it is part of this endeavor to bring together the different pieces of the development architecture. The second key point to make is that BII has already been active in the energy space, and we have identified energy access as the most lever or the most critical constraint on economic growth in the African continent, where, as we all know, almost 80% of the people in the world who live without electricity reside in our markets. To that end, BII has already delivered solutions where up to 26 million people receive electricity today from projects that BII has pioneered, 19 million on-grid and another 7 million off-grid. And in that regard, Mission 300 will have now, as part of the overall offering, our company, GridWorks, which is really a specialist in off-grid solutions, because many of the countries do not have the transmission infrastructure to deliver the electricity, even if it's generated. In short, we are part of the broad alliance working with our peers towards this common objective. Thanks,
Leslie. And I think we've got some questions coming in to zoom back out a bit. We've got one from Barbara Redmaker from Okio Credit International. And Barbara is asking whether the poly crisis, things like the Ukraine war, the Middle East destabilization, extreme weather events, etc., will affect our investment strategy. Diana, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. And Barbara, poly crisis is a great term. I haven't heard it before, but I think it's very relevant here. I think all of these challenges, as I've highlighted in previous questions, actually have 2 angles. The first is that there's never been a greater need for development, and there's never been a more important focus on making sure that we have the maximum impact that we can. So I think those thematically are key in answering your question. In terms of specifically our strategy, I think it's critical to understand that BII is long-term patient capital. We invest for long periods of time to drive development impact. And I think we believe that our strategy is focused on the right things in the right places. In terms of the themes, I think we operate across the key areas around power and renewable energy, infrastructure and climate, around financial services, and the broader areas of industrial and technical solutions. So I think we are invested in the right sectors, and I think we're broadly invested in the right markets where we have real development expertise. What I do think we'll see as we start now, given that poly crisis, to think about what does our next 5-year strategy period look like. As we reflect on that, I think the themes of making sure that we are really sharply focused on areas of greatest impact and that we are operating with maximum effectiveness will be central. I don't think we expect a huge strategic shift from that. I do think we believe that those themes of core development impact, climate, and additional mobilization of private capital to really try and plug some of those significant gaps in funding, all of those are going to be key as a result of this.
So just as a follow-up on this idea of maximizing impact, we have a question from Alex Jaggard from UK Export Finance, who's asking how BII can work with other UK public financial institutions to leverage the respective financing and capability offers to address the complex and interconnected challenges in a holistic manner with clear UK branding. Diana, perhaps you could pick that up and Leslie can add to it.
Sure. Let me give you some sense of the history here. I think this has been an opportunity for some time. And over the last couple of years, we've really tried to work more closely with organisations like PIDGE, like UK Export Finance, to think about how the UK offering can hold together more holistically, to make sure that we understand each other's pipelines and to work together more effectively. We will absolutely continue to do that and to really try and find real tangible opportunities to invest together. So that alignment, I think, is something that's new and it's important. Is there more we can do? Can we do it better? Absolutely. And Leslie, perhaps you could pick up on some of the day-to-day collaboration.
Thank you very much, Dana. Indeed, already over the last 2 decades, really, FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, have pioneered and created a number of institutions who today work together in quite a coordinated fashion. One is PIDGE, the Private Infrastructure Development Group, which operates in many of our markets, aimed at sort of, making sure we can fast track the development of investment pipelines, so we can have greater visibility on the bankable projects in these markets. Secondly, there's financial sector deepening, which is really focused on the dedicated steps required to have more to support the creation of capital markets in a more long-term sense. Then, of course, BII is focused on investing in private companies for impact. And then we've got UK Export Finance is really focused on helping UK companies compete better internationally. We recognize the CEOs of these institutions. We work together on a regular basis. We recognize the need for greater coordination because we see ourselves as complementary pieces of the overarching UK development toolkit. So that collaboration has been deepened in practice. Thank you.
So also on the lines of collaboration and maximizing impact, again, we've got a question coming in from Julia Ahmed, who wants to hear more about impact on achieving gender equality goals. So can we speak a bit more about our gender targets?
Thank you very much for the question, Julia. As you know, BII has really played over many years, actually, a leadership role in the sort of impact investment industry, but also within the broader development finance landscape. That leadership has been demonstrated in some concrete initiatives. For example, the creation of the 2X challenge way back 2018 when Canada hosted the G7. And that initiative grew to become not just a standard. The 2X challenge was not just mainstream within the development finance space, but was also mainstreams throughout the investment world more broadly. So what we have done, or what BII successfully done, in my view, is develop industry standard for what does gender smart investment actually means, and then to develop programs to boost financing for women. In 2024, as we referenced earlier on, we made £499 million of gender smart investments, which represents about 29% of our full commitments. And we will continue to increase the ambition. We've set ourselves the ambition of 25% over the 5-year strategy period. We've already achieved 34% in practice. So in short, we structure our investment to maximize the impact for women, and we also do it through other means. For example, through our financial services business, we have programs, what we call directed lending, where we use banks as intermediaries to support women entrepreneurs. And then finally, we also develop gender diagnostics, and we help our individual investee companies to improve their programs and performance with respect to gender action plans. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. A good follow-on for that might be one for Diana, where there's a question here on how BII manages to balance between profitability and impactful development in the sector or the region.
So I think the first thing to say is that impact is our North Star. That's the main metric that we look to, and it's what we're absolutely focused on. We obviously do need to make a return to ensure the sustainability of our portfolio, but also because the nature of the businesses we invest in means that they can only be successful if they make a return. So I think it's important to highlight that there shouldn't be a tension between these two. They are actually reinforcing in terms of what, so it's not as though we're kind of constantly having to make trade-offs between them. But as I said, our North Star where we do is the impact that we have.
And I think a good follow-on to this idea is a question from Anthony Smith from the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, who's asking that given the importance of accountability and rule of law for economic growth, how do you take account of governance at national level in your investment decisions? And how can BII work with others to contribute to deepening democracy and rule of law?
So it's a very important question. As you say, I think we're all very aware of the importance of institutions and stability and the rule of law in economic development. So that is always something that I think we're all trying to encourage. Particularly, however, when you invest in fragile markets as we do, many of which are sort of post-conflict states, you can't wait until there is a perfect environment before investing. And we need to be part of really a positive cycle of investment and development. And that investment takes many forms. Our investment is very focused on private sector investment, but we work very closely, for example, with FCDO around policy development, around institution building, and it's that partnership in some ways with other UK institutions and with organisations like FCDO that I think is very important in driving development. We're always interested in working more broadly, but I think this is, as you say, very much a collaborative effort.
Okay, thanks, Diana. I think we have one more question, perhaps one for you, Leslie, which sort of goes back to our investment approach. And the question is from Bilal Skyjay from So Pure Company Limited, who's asking how BII can work with local partner banks to offer SMEs interest rates lower than the central bank's lending rate. Higher rates are a major barrier. Are there strategies to ease this burden in emerging markets?
Thank you very much for that question. SMMEs, as we all know, constitute the heart of most of the African economies. You know, we have a context where small, medium, and micro enterprises are often the largest employers, and they are fundamental to achieving the outcome that we are seeking to achieve as BII. Now, the funding needs of SMMEs are naturally quite varied, so we do not have a shotgun approach on this. We study what particular market interventions best suit the kind of solutions that are needed. So most recently, for example, one of the key innovations was the creation of what we call growth investment partners, which is really a specialist SMME financing vehicle that we've created in Ghana around July 2023. One of the big challenges in a lot of our markets is the availability of long-term local currency financing options. And what's unique about this particular platform, even though BII balance sheet is largely in hard currency, GIP, or the Growth Investment Partners, we offer flexible local currency financing options, which is specifically tailored to the needs of each of these borrowers. So I guess the first point I'm making is that we're hoping to scale some of these partnerships and platforms, because we recognize that the provision of in local currency for SMMEs is probably where we can have the largest impact. And a number of concrete examples. One, for example, is FIDO, which is a digital lender to low-income workers, micro entrepreneurs and businesses. And many of these businesses have very limited access to traditional financial services. So we step in where the formal financial sector is unable to provide financing solutions.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that was our final question. Thank you so much, Leslie and Diana, for your candid and detailed responses. I am afraid that that's all we have time for. Thank you to all of you for your questions, and I'm sorry if we didn't get to answer everyone's today. We do very much value your engagement during these sessions. I know that many of you will keep the conversation going with us in the coming months, and we do look forward to that. To conclude our event today, I'd like to hand you back to Diana for her final words.
Thank you, Huma. I just wanted to leave you with three things. First of all, we've had relatively little time today, although I'm sure it's felt like a long time to some of you, to go through all of the things that BII does, and I just wanted to encourage you to read the annual review. When you read it, you do understand the sheer scope and number of activities that we're involved in, and I think you get a sense of the extraordinary impact that we have through our investees and really get a feel for the kinds of projects that we invest in. It's very, very different to see it ideally in person, but to see it in pictures and to read about it, to really understand how our impact translates. The second thing I wanted to do was just to reassure you that we as a board are really continuing to encourage BII to step up in this environment, to really continue to innovate in this space, to redouble the focus on impact, to focus on modern partnerships, and to support all of the work that's going on around climate and climate innovation. And finally, to think about mobilization of private capital. We do believe that this is a very challenging global environment, but that BII is uniquely well placed to respond to that and to help that in the current environment, to be self-sustaining and to continue to invest for development. I hope you've had a sense of the extraordinary impact that these people and companies can have in our markets. And I want to thank our investees for all of the work that they do with us, for their commitment and their impact on the world. So it was really fantastic to have you join us today, and thank you all so much. Finally, a big thank you to those of you listening online. You are our partners. You have and will continue to scrutinize us and keep us on our toes. We're very much looking forward to continuing the engagement with you to further the development impact that we can have across our markets. Thank you again for your time today, for attending, for all your support. I hope you have a good day.